I can edit that thing later. That's the reason why I do it the other way. This message is one that I kind of struggle with quite a bit, and it's one of those like, really, Lord. And a lot of times we're put in those situations where we need to do something for whatever reason, and we really don't want to, but someone's got to. Well, I was reading something this week, and it had an awesome point that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I'd never seen this before, and I felt like I needed to share that. But in order to get at that, I had to get through the other writing, which was taking place in their time. What I really wanted to touch on was 1 Peter chapter 3. But before I get there, I want to go back and touch on a few things. One is like in Genesis. We go back to Genesis where God created everything, and then he creates man and woman. So it's Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image." Now that Hebrew word they're using for man, can be man, woman, human. So in that sense right there, it's like, let's make human beings in our image, according to our likeness. And let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. So when it's talking about him, it's talking about man to begin with, because he's talking about both at the end. We can find out that he is talking about human beings all at once. It's just the way that they were writing, because as generation and generation, the way we talk, the way we write, the way we speak about things, they change over times. You go to any store right now, and you'll see a young teen or a 20-year-old, you'll see a 40-year-old, you'll see someone in their 80s, and you have three different cultures. And a lot of times, neither one understand the other, because they're like, oh, that's old. But then they get to the older one, they can't comprehend it. And it's at no fault of our own. It's the way the world keeps changing and all. So we have to dig back into the meaning of these words when we study them. But the first thing I want to get out here is that God made male and female to be equal. Both of them in the image of God. Both of them unique. Not one greater than another. In Genesis 2:20 it says, "And the man gave names to all the cattle, and to the birds of the sky, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper suitable for him." Now, the helper, partner, companion, that's suitable. When you break down that Hebrew word there, it means parallel. Different, not the same. That's the reason why we have two that's totally different. And it goes on down, and the Lord fashioned into the woman the rib which he had taken from the man, and brought her to the man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed." All right, you can read a lot into that. One, they were naked, they were open. They didn't know about all this other stuff in this world today. They didn't know about all the lust and all the greed and everything else. They were open, they were free. It's like, here I am, not trying to hide nothing, not trying to lie about things, until after they ate. Said they would both become one. That word one, and we find it again in the New Testament whenever Jesus is speaking in Matthew, says they would both become one. That one is like parts come together as one whole. They are separate beings. They are not meant to be the exact same person. Me and my wife do not think the same way about everything. We weren't made to. She completes me, just like I complete her. We're made to walk side by side. Not one over the other, but equals. I wanted to say that, bring that part out, because as we get over to the New Testament, cultures has changed quite a bit. We'll start in Ephesians chapter 5. And maybe I'll touch on where I wanted to get. But in a second, we'll go to Ephesians chapter 5. We find in this time frame, you started off the laws as being, all right, the male was the one they always wrote about. The male was the one that was up here. The females they were pretty much the homebodies. They were the ones that didn't have a say-so, didn't have rights, and we know that from our own history. It wasn't too long ago that we had these divisions in our own country. Well, this is like 3,500 years ago, 4,000 years ago, where you had the male that was the dominant one that was going around, that their word was it, and you had the female that was considered there to raise kids, pretty much. But whenever they came together as one, they were supposed to be partners. According to the law, supposed to be partners. As times changed, you had some rabbis that was taking the law and because of what Moses had put out in Deuteronomy about if they offend you, you can write them a piece of divorce and send them on the way. They were actually writing on a paper in front of a rabbi and two witnesses that, hey, I am divorcing you, putting it in her hand as long as he sends the whole dowry back to the father, and that was the divorce. That was it. You had the first rabbi that would come across, and it's like, all right, whenever it says, that you're finding fault in her. It's not that you just don't like her no more. It's that you have caught her in adultery. You have caught her in an act against you and against God. And that's what what they were holding to. And then it moved from that to go over to the more liberal aspects, giving the man permission to divorce their wives at any whim. If you were to find a younger one that pleases you more, let her go and take the other one. Stupid stuff. The law never meant for that. But they were twisting it to say what they wanted to say. That way they can do what they wanted to do. And this is one of the reasons why Jesus came back over in Matthew 19, and he said that, and he answered and said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. That aspect, that way of talking is like the church is supposed to be one body. And every time you have a separation or division, it's like you're trying to amputate an arm or a leg. Because in all the hurt, all the people that's taken everything, and all that love is just destroyed from bitterness and wanting to put people down. So therefore you're cutting off part of you. That's what all these denominations inside the church came to do. There was no denominations back there when Jesus walked the earth. It was the way. And then after that, they migrated from being called the way to in Antioch, they were called Christians as a mockery. It's like, y'all trying to be like that one we hung on the cross. Y'all Christians. So they held that name, saying, yes, we're trying to be like him because he is the Son of God. Because he came and died for us. He came to make a way for us because he loves us. And that's the reason why they held on that name, Christians. They didn't have any other of these breakdowns. Well, that same way, Jesus was trying to get them to understand back then that this should be the same way as your marriage. Here, and during this time, by the time it got to Rome, when Rome had taken over, it was so bad that it was nothing for them to have 1, 2, 3 different husbands same year. One of them was known for the female had like 24, I think it was, husbands, and her husband at that time had 21 wives before her. It was nothing sacred about it no more. That's the reason why in a Christian marriage we come together before God and we take one another. Because in the house, the home, that is supposed to be the basis, the foundation of who we are, compared to the basis of the church and how the whole body is supposed to act. And I've ran across some of these verses before, and if you read it, it makes it feel really uncomfortable, especially in today's society. And you'll actually think that one is supposed to be is reading like it's greater than the other, but it's not. It's doing right the opposite. In this time frame that Paul is writing, the woman had no say-so. The man could divorce the wife at whim for anything, everything. The only reason a woman could divorce her husband was if they had leprosy, or something like that. Very little. Oh yeah, leprosy, or if they disown the faith. And that was the Jewish faith, because then they consider them dead. That wasn't the Christian faith. Paul added that other one in there that, hey, if they won't accept you because you want to be safe, because they considered the female more like property at that time. And they were considering them as the dad had to say somewhere if they lived or died. And once he gave her to the man to marry, then now that man, the husband, had the same say-so whether she lived or died. So in these aspects, when they're writing, they're giving them so much more credibility than what we actually believe whenever we read it in today's modern eyes. He's given them equality. And he's also saying, talking to the man about, you are not to be over them as a tyrant. You're blessed to be in this position. You're blessed to be as the head of the household, to be a representative of Christ as he is. We'll pick up in Ephesians here, chapter 5, verse 21. And be subject to one another in fear of Christ. So it's saying right there, and that's the ending of one statement that he's making, but I wanted to get that last part in there, subject to one another. That's every one of us. Have respect to one another. Be mindful of one another. Remember one another as humans and children of God, and equal with us. Has feelings, has passions, no matter what position we get in. 22, wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. Your own husband, not be running around. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and blameless. So husbands ought to love their own wives, not anyone else's wife, your own wife, as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. All right. It starts off by saying about the wives, their own husband, and the husband being the head of the church. All right. one thing to remember is that people throughout time take this verse and they don't try to see what it's actually saying. Husbands, you're the head of the family, as Christ is. Christ was never my head until my eyes were opened and I saw what he did for me out of love. I was never one of his. He was never my head. I was never part of the church until I saw how much he really loved me. He did not have to come to earth. He did not have to come down here in a servant family and work through hardship, work through hunger and starvation, knowing good and well that the very same ones that he created was going to spit on him, ridicule him, mock him, use whips on him, rip his skin off, and then hang him up until he died. He already knew what they were going to do. He even told his apostles before that day came, this is what's going to happen. So why did he do it? He sacrificed everything that he had on the throne. He put it off to the side to come down here because he loved us. See, love is not an emotion. And that's what the Old Testament keeps telling us the whole entire time. Every time the Israelites messed up, and God was always right there. Someone messes up that much, we're just going to say, hey, you're on your own, right? But not God, because he was trying to show us what true love really is. True love is a covenant. It's saying, I know you're not going to be perfect, but I'm going to be here anyway. A true love between a husband and a wife is whenever you're going down the road and all of a sudden you hit somebody. And one of you is a quadriplegic for the rest of their life, and the other one is sitting right there beside them, willing to feed them, bathe them, clothe them, wipe their butt, you name it, and for the rest of the time, because they want to be with that person. That person do nothing more for them in any of those other aspects that they enjoyed. Hiking, fishing, going on the town without them with a little wheelchair and everything else now, of course. But it's still, this is a person that I want to be with. This is my partner. And it can be the male or the female there. It doesn't matter. They're equal before God. Sometimes he puts us in these roles that we have because without order, there's complete chaos. And we see that all over the place. How many of you ever played cowboys and Indians? And then the Indians, you always, okay, who's the chief? Everybody wanted to be the chief. There wasn't nobody said, I just want to be a scout. You all want to be the one calling the shots. But when everybody's got their own different mindsets and way it should be, then everybody's running around with nothing getting done. It's absolute chaos. So that's the reason why he was like putting an order here. Especially with the society and the culture that was going on at that time, it was the one thing that was going to make the most sense, and it's going to keep them alive pretty much. It's going to help them. So he's telling the husband, as Christ is the head of the church. Whenever our eyes are open and we see the love that he had, see everything he set aside because he loved us. And we ask him to be our head. We ask him to be our Lord. That's whenever we become submissive to him out of respect. Because we know that everything he does for our sake. He does for our good. No matter what we're going through in this life, it's not like, okay, if you don't give me this job, then I'm going to go find another God to worship. It's not like that. It's, I know that you're right there for me. And I might not get this job. You know what's going to be best for me in the long run. You know what's going to benefit me and my family in the long run. And we trust in him. That same love is what what Paul is telling the men to have for their wife. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter if you come in and they're nagging you left and right, or you can't never please them. It doesn't matter if they're the best wife at all you can ever ask for. It doesn't matter. Your responsibility is to be a sacrificial love offering to them, to come underneath them and pick them up and carry them, because that's your family. I put it that way because of what Peter says a little bit later during that same time frame. Now keep in mind what Paul was talking to here is a couple that are both believers. They both believe in God. They both love God. So this right here would be the ideal of the Christian home back whenever Paul was writing this. For the man that's going out and doing the work to come under and pick his family up, support them, love them, know that she is your equal. She is not less than by no means. And honor her as such. Give up that bass boat whenever you know that your family is in need of food on the table. Give up that fishing trip whenever you know that one of them is hurt and needs a hand. Put their needs before your own wants. Whenever your family sees that, hey, you're doing everything, making all your choices for the benefit of the family because you love me, that's whenever they respect him as that head. But if he's going to do whatever just to play a game, if he's not worried about what they need of food on the table or anything else, then why should they? Because there's no love there. He's not being the head as Christ was the head. But this right here is the relationship that God is calling for us to do. A sacrificial love, one for another. As I touch on real quick on 1 Peter chapter 3. It says a lot in the first six verses about the woman to the man, and that's basically for that time frame. Like I said, it was really rough for females back then, and you just have to study the background to get a bigger grasp on just what they were all going through. Because if a man was to go and change religions, then the whole entire family would come and they were to change religion, and that was in their culture. However, what was almost never heard of, but was happening at times, was when the female come to Christ, but the man wasn't. The whole family wasn't coming to Christ, just her, and that's what Peter was talking about here. Is when one believes and one doesn't. So that if they're not living by the word, if they're not hearing the word here, then you then live according to the word before them. That way they can read the word through your actions. I would say that goes for both of us nowadays, because nowadays we're not like one goes, so all of us goes. But no matter who we are, male or female, we can stand before the family and witness to them without any words whatsoever. We can be their word that they're reading through our actions to them, submitting one to another, having respect one to another, not one over the other. Verse 7 is what to the husbands I wanted to read though. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Says, you husbands likewise live with your wives in an understanding way, as with a weaker vessel, since she is a woman, and grant her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Okay, we look at a weaker vessel. It does not mean they're less than inside of God. We know that. But if you were to even look at science right here, you'll see that there's a lot of differences between the male and the female. This right here is science. It doesn't matter what someone classifies themselves in their head. Whenever they lay in that tomb and all the skin goes away, they're left with this, a skeleton. This right here is the makeup. And you see how the pelvic bones are different. A male cannot do the things that a woman has to do. They won't be able to put up with that much pain. But, you know, the pelvic bones alone is different. The rib cages, they're different. The shoulders, the whole muscular shape is different. If you look at this, the skull, all these members, that's just the different aspects between the male and the female in the skull alone. This is science, anatomy, that you can't change. Two different sculptures right here. So, one aspect they say is thinking that was the weaker vessel is, you know, you're going to be doing the heavy lifting a lot of times. Now, granted, I've seen some women that I do not want to go up against. And there'd be a hard time finding a woman man that's a little bit stronger than them. But, you know, he's saying you're structured so you can go out there and do this. Don't be expecting them to do all of this right here. Come underneath them, support them, pick them up. You know, work together. Be partners. Also in society at this time. At this time, when it was written, they were very weak on the totem pole. So he was saying, come underneath them, support them. Remember that they are joint heirs with you. Do not treat them like regular society would, but treat them as your equal because they're your equal partners. Honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. There's the biggest thing. A lot of times we think that our prayer life and our devotion life is separate than our private life or a public life. But what it's saying right here in this verse is that how we handle the situation and the area that God has put us in and planted us in, that alone determines our relationship with Christ. Is it just face value that's in a dark closet? Or does it come out of our pores because we want people to know His love, because we've spent so much time with Him that we feel His love to us and we just want to share that love with others? That we are now sharing it in our actions, the way we talk, the way we act, the way we treat our spouse, the way we treat our kids. It doesn't matter about male or female. This right here is how we take our personal life in the home, behind closed doors, as well as how we treat our public life. All of that is to represent Christ and who we are. Because if our heart, if we're mistreating our families, if we're mistreating our loved ones, if we're cheating on them, we're doing any of this other stuff that we know is ungodly, the Bible clearly talks against, then that's tarnishing and ripping away the part about us that should be close to God. Don't forget, I said the marriage, the two becomes one. Repeatedly. That means one body. So that means me and my wife, she is the other part of me. And if I was to do anything to go against her, then it would be like taking a knife or something and cutting on my own arm. That's how much it should be hurting. For them to separate, it should be like ripping off a limb. That's just how important that God puts marriage. That's how important it is to Him that we represent Him in every little aspect of our life. Not just on Sundays or Wednesdays, but in every single day, every conversation. Let them know they're loved. Now, I'd like to venture on and say that in the marriage, the house like this, we find like in Timothy and Titus, and even here, because if you go back to chapter 2, it's talking about the government and the workers and then the family. But the family, how you treat your family should be on a small scale for the foundation on how you're going to do your big scale. Pastors, you should be able to do all this inside your homes before you become a pastor, right? So, I would say that how we treat the people under us, those that we have that are working for us, is a same regard as this, knowing that they are joint heirs if they're believers, knowing that they are human beings and that we are supposed to be representing Christ to each and every one of them. It doesn't matter if they're a different religion than us. It doesn't matter if their beliefs is totally against what we believe. It doesn't matter if they hate our guts. The way we respond to them, that's what we stand accountable for before God. So we're supposed to be representing Christ to them, taking care of them, coming under them, leading them in a way that's proper. You know, I was active Army. I had all these different officers going around, right? And you had some that had been enlisted before and some that wasn't. But one I'll never forget is on a very hot summer day in the middle of Texas. You had this. We had to go out there for a late evening and do extra work on the tanks. And there was one officer, just one. He went out of his own pocket and got Gatorade and cold sodas and stuff and packed it in his truck and drove into the motor pool and had us all stop and come over there because he didn't know everything about the tanks. He was new at that, but he knew about people under him and he cared about us. So no, he wasn't able to get out there and do everything that we could, but what he could do was take care of us. So he made sure that we came over there and took a break, get a drink, get something cold, and get refreshed before we got back out there. He was trying his best to take care of us the best he could. And that's what we should be doing. Any position that God has planted us in, use it for His glory, so others can represent Him. There was a king in Germany, King Henry III. About halfway through, he said, "You know what? I'm done with this." He didn't want to continue with his reign no more. He was tired of the monastery stuff, all the courts and everything. So he decided he was going to go down there and join the ministry. So I just want to live a life of solitude over here. He went to Friar Richard, I believe his name was, and upon taking the vow to live for the rest of his life in obedience, Friar Richardson's like, "Now, King, you know that this is going to be extremely hard for you because you've been a king this whole time. And now you are saying you're ready to live the rest of your life in submission to someone else, in obedience to someone else. So are you ready to do that?" It's like, "I know it's going to be rough, but yes, I want to do that." So he swore him in, and Friar Richard said, "Okay, from now on, then you are to go back and be a king as obedience for God, because that is where He has planted you." So it was written that he went back, and for the rest of his life, he was a king set in obedience for God. Doesn't matter where He put us, there's always something to do for Him. Might be the one that you never think of that's watching you. Might be your kids, it might be someone else's kids. It might be a soldier, it might be a worker. It could be anyone. But they read us every day. Everything we say, everything we do. So let's make sure that they read Christ in us. Because we're going to be the ones that answer to Him, no one else. We each one answer for our own actions, good or bad.